Lieutenant General V.G. Khandare and Lieutenant General P.S. Rajeshwar and of course Mr. Bharat Gupta. I'd like for Lieutenant General Subrata Saha to take on the proceedings, please.
Thank you. Can we start? Yeah, thank you. It's okay, he'll come, no problem. No problem. Very good afternoon to you, ladies and gentlemen. Good to see some numbers at least. And thank you, Dr. Chopra, Mrs. Chopra, General Pannu for, on behalf of my entire panel for inviting us. It's so, encouraging to hear speaker after speaker saying, warfare is the business of the nation. Trust me, for most of us here who have been in uniform are seeing this positive transition in the national thinking with a lot of encouragement because somehow you saw some hints to that even in a couple of the earlier sessions. The fact is the country is changing, thinking of the people is changing, and which I think puts us in a very good position. Just to put, because I see some young generation also here, just to give a little historical perspective to this session that we have on economics and business of warfare. It is not as if we didn't have a military-industrial complex. When we got independent, we started with 18 ordnance factories, 1 DPSU, and a small element of defense R&D. But despite that, we just seem to have lost that capability somewhere. And if you compare with our Western neighbors, who took away just a couple of ordnance factories from here, the pace at which they sustained their ordnance factories, their aviation complex, let us grant it to them, they definitely did it with much more commitment than what we did over here. Well, to cut a long story short, eventually it's only in 2001 that the decision was taken and come out of that, slumber, open up this complete defense industrial base to the private sector. But like all things in India, they take a little while or a crisis to start delivering. It took another decade and a half to get things in order, and perhaps you can find faults with everyone. We are finally seeing good momentum in that, and as I was quoting even in the last session, that now we are moving from an importing to an exporting nation, and 411 pieces of equipment. If the armed forces have taken a call that we are not going to import hereafter, it is a major one. And for those, who may be having doubts on the quality and all, let me tell you one thing, that there are countries who import any equipment which has been introduced in India's armed forces. That is the kind of faith that they have in the trial system that we put into place. So that much should be an assurance as far as the quality is concerned. Nobody is compromising quality. Nobody is going to compromise capability because, in our business of warfare, nice term, business of warfare, there is no place for a runner-up. Either you're dead or you're alive. It's as simple as that. So with that little, starting, I want to now, get across to my panel, and it couldn't have been stronger than that. General Vinod Khandare has been the DG of Defense Intelligence. He has been with as a military advisor in the National Security Council Secretariat. He is currently again an advisor with the Ministry of Defense. So quite evidently, I will fall back on him to come up with all the policy interventions. And then I will go to General Rajeshwar, who has been our CISC, Chief of the Integrated Staff Committee. And he did it in a time when there was no CDS. So he was effectively the executive CDS, so to speak. And so he has been our CISC. So therefore, I would go on his wisdom as far as the budget part is concerned, because unless and until you have the budgetary support, no matter how much you keep manufacturing, you don't get anywhere. And we have an expert who is a combination of industry and military both, a mobile military industrial complex, if you will. He is from the ICT side, information and communication technology. I would rather utilize his expertise to get some quick study, literally like case studies out of his expertise, so that we understand whatever the generals are saying a little better. So with that, if I can start with General Khandare, Vinod, if you could just, quickly tell us, what are these, major policy interventions that we have seen almost in the last just short of a decade, which has changed this complete flavor. We just heard what Vipin Sondhi told us in the last, session. So what are these policy changes and what impact they are having, et cetera, we can do with a follow-up. But if you can give a sense to the audience, what are these policy, initiatives that the government has put in place, specifically with the defense industry?
Thank you, sir. The first part is very difficult to cover all the policy changes. I will touch upon only few key issues. The first part, 2016, when we went in for the defense procurement process, manual, and then 2020 we again went in for a change because no policy can be static, and with the kind of technological changes that come up, there has to be a shift, which is a minor modification. So DPC, DPM, that kind of thing, we have DAP, so that is one. The second change came up with the corporatization of the Ordnance Factory Board, and in that General Saha and me, we were both working very closely. And while most of us would be very critical of the political class, I must assure you, when this Ordnance Factory corporatization was being done, the sensitivity was kept in mind because the government was, or the ruling party was to go into 5 states for elections, but still it was handled well. And let me also highlight here, when we had that Doklam standoff, which is the 2017 episode, please recollect there was a local agitation which was going around. Eastern Ladakh or the standoffs which were happening, the ordnance factories were again on a strike, and there was a threat around that particular time. But I think it is to the wisdom and the maturity of the government how they handled it. I do not want to spell out everything how that was done, but we did not see a strike around that time. The other issue that I want to touch upon is the process of Atmanirbharta. The merits of doing it, the methodology of doing it, everyone can have an opinion on that. But what is more important is that we've started, and we've started with a vigor, with a focus. At least you've got the direction. Now the momentum is for all of us to ensure. Now within that, what was spelled out is about the IDEX. So IDEX is something which we realized you have to make a problem statement as a user and throw it open as a challenge. And thereafter, it is for the startups, the innovators, to jump in. And there is a kind of financial support. It's a very thin line trying to find out the really interested parties, the real capable people, and the passionate people. So that is where the challenge is thrown to them. And you all have seen in artificial intelligence, we've done that initiative. Then in the month of June, 75 challenges have been open for maritime sector. And during the DEF Expo, 75 challenges have been thrown open to the space sector. There'll be many more to follow. It's not that this is something which has ended. This is something which will continue. But General Saha sir, this does not finish with the policy. Actually, it is the people who implement the policy. It is the people who study what more needs to be done in the policy as far as the application is concerned. Unless you're inclusive to that, the policy will keep lying there. You've got to implement it, you've got to do it well, and you've got to further bring changes as the time changes. I'll give you one small example about the space sector. In the previous sessions, people have said that it is no more about tri-services. It is much beyond that. Non-kinetic warfare is the bigger challenge now. And declaration of war possibly will not happen the way Putin has done. But the war is ongoing. And in that, if we have to see space sector, information warfare, cyber, these are the bigger challenges. Now, this is where skill sets are required. So, policies also for human resource is extremely important. And human resource is something every individual wants his personal progression. So, this is something where the three services will have to really dip into their human resource policy and bring in a change. It cannot be business as usual.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vinod. You know, I must share something with you. As deputy chief, I was literally spent every weekend in one or the other academic or industry hub in the country. And we went out with that, coinage which I had done, that with your collaboration and support, we will win India's wars with Indian solutions. That said, after some time, the industry started saying that, General, why don't you give us some problem statements that we can deal with? So when I came back to my own establishment and I wanted a compendium of problem statements to be put out, you will find it hard to believe that there is this, your organization culture, which is groomed into, for everything, no problem, sir. To tell them that we are going to put out a document called Compendium of Problem Statements, it is a really uphill task. And also it is not so simple. Okay, if you go back and see Compendium of Problem Statements, Volume 1, statement number 34, okay, it is just sheer coincidence that around the same time a video went viral in which a BSF Jawan was showing the poor quality of chapatis that he was baking somewhere in the Punch sector. And we had this problem statement number 34, which stated that armed forces need high protein content food for high altitude areas. So one journalist, journalist brains are very good at joining dots. He joined this with that and he put out an article with big captions. The army has been telling you all along that the quality of food is bad. Next morning, I was summoned by literally everybody from the military to the political hierarchy that ye kya kar diya aapne? Bina matlab marwa diya. Who asked you to put all this over there? So then you have to go back and explain to people. It took a while, for the system to change and people to come around to accepting terms like compendium of problem statements coming from armed forces. And today you just heard Gen Khandare, the rate at which they are being taken out by the three services and the Ministry of Defense, all of them put together. But anyway, all these problem statements are being solved. And I recollect General Bipin Rawat in Def Expo 2018 in Chennai. He said that I am overwhelmed by the solutions that I am getting to the problem statements. I don't seem to have the budget to support all the solutions. So budget is a major consideration. And to give us a little, more in-depth sense on that, I would turn to General Rajeshwar to kindly give the audience and all of us indeed a sense on, how this whole defense budget and the defense capability and the aspirations of the industry, we heard Mr. Sondi, rather the desire of the industry to work. How are we going to balance all this given all the constraints that we are working with?
Thank you, sir. At the outset, let me thank General Pannu and Dr. Chopra for hosting us all over. I would distill three thoughts. One is, I think we are living in an era of uneasy peace, right? So I think peace is a different aspect altogether. Uneasy peace is what we are living in, which I think to translate into war can happen. I'd rather be prepared for it, is the way I see it, rather than get surprised over it. Okay. The second thing is, what do we need? Prevention of war is possible only if we understand it. We have a plan about it, and we have a plan about it now. It's not that when it happens, we will deal with it. So, why I'm giving you this prelude is, before I take you to defense economics, I personally feel strongly that 75 years are over. Okay? And if we have to go and hit 100 and do it well, I think we have to also look at ourselves as a confident nation, and therefore we should articulate the national security strategy is very important, because often in my service we have reached points where you have to actually look over your shoulder as far as strategy is concerned, because that means it is a whole of nation approach. Everybody said that. What do we do about it? This is very, very important. Why I feel it is it cannot rest in the minds of a very few, and then you struggle for it. Because the entire, like we are right now saying we will export so much of things. How will that happen if people at the finances don't understand, the industry doesn't understand, or the military themselves don't understand? So you have to have something, and everybody is in it. So that is, I think, because that is going to determine our deterrence. And in a world of uneasy peace, I think we can be strong. We are pretty strong. We can start exhibiting. Now, whether you want to put the nuts and bolts in it or keep that away, that's a different issue, and we can deal with that as well. But a little bit of a framework will help. And I will request you to kindly think of deterrence and then listen to what I'm saying. Okay. I'll just compare mathematical figures. 4.78 lakh crores was the defense budget. When I say defense budget, I'm, looking at the overall budget, which is defense services estimates, the pensions that we give, and also MOD civil part of it. This was it, notwithstanding all the challenges we've had over the last year. Early this year, it was upped to 5.25 lakh crores, which is a 10% hike, and that's a great thing. Okay. How does it compare? Because you have to make a sense of it, of the GDP. That translates to around just tad over 2%. Okay, 2.04 if you're going to go for the, fine print. But what is interesting, and perhaps there is a trend. If you look at the trend, I don't want to give you the decadal trend, but I know what it is. Of the central government expenditure, it is 14.44%. If that is the case, and imagine in the last 3 to 4 years, we've had hot situations, whether it's the line of control or the LAC. And if you look at the trend, it tells you what the focus is. And therefore, we need to take cognizance of that, is what I'm saying. The next thing is the services world over, and I've been part of the services from the military fraternity, will always ask for more, because after all, which commander is not a cautious commander? Because when you have to fight, you have to make sure your losses are minimal and the losses on the other side are maximal. So what tool don't you want? So when you look at the 21-22 allocation versus projection, 2 lakh crores were demanded, and I'm looking at the capital part of it, which is the strength of the budget, not looking at running and maintaining things, and compare it to a 5/8 delivery, which is 1.23 lakh crore. Okay, so my sense is, if there is a national security strategy which is broadly put, you will not have, you will articulate what you want and you will get there. You can't wait for it then, right? When you look at revenue versus capital, as far as because revenue means it continues your militaries to work as efficiently as at least the last year, versus capital, which is the punch. It was 2,12,027 versus a capital of 135,060, which means we actually end up spending more on revenue. And of that, between the three services, obviously, Army is most manpower intensive. You can either justify it or have an alternative view. But that is the truth. And if challenges are going to be more, till technology kicks in, and that's where I think we are having a discussion in the next session. It's very important because it's easy to say this many, cameras you got, that is there. So what? You're actually augmenting the soldier. That is my view. You're enabling him. You cannot dispense with him. Okay. So a little bit of old will happen. Now, the next point that General Saha said, why do you want this money? Why don't you do with what you have? Right? So are we looking at, the theme is security at 75, but somebody did the homework before us, our predecessors who worked for 20 years, 30 years. That's why we got here. We could have been in a much worse state, or we could have been in a better state, whichever way you can look at it. But I'm sure, whatever the orders were, the armed forces did their best. Okay. So if you're looking at security at 100, you need to have a great appreciation of what kind of threats are there. Is there enough? You can visualize anything? No. You can bank on history, and the theme is that. That's great, because you need to learn lessons from old. But you need to look into the future. Both technology and tactics decide the capabilities. Even in the Russia-Ukraine war, you are seeing that even when a smaller country is confronted, it's the combination of the two which determines, what capability you actually put in vogue at various levels. So we need to be enabled. Now, when you look at the strategy, that will tell you what kind of a nation you want to be. Are you aspirational, or what are we? And what is the way of life you're looking? And that will also determine for deterrence what capabilities you need, as I said. And if you look at the actual maths of it, an indigenous aircraft carrier, you know how much it cost us, right? I'm not going to tell you when it started and when we did it, because that is understandable. To me as a professional, it is understandable that good things will take time. But yes, if good things take too much of time, which is a case in some of our aircraft acquisitions and manufacture, then it isn't a good thing. Okay, so what does it leave you with? That means if you take a hiatus or you take a break for, let us say, 5 years, 10 years, and say, first let me get the money set and then let me start making, it won't work, as we are seeing it now. And another thing is, if you initiate projects, very good. It should be done. It's an important thing. We have done the Make in India. In fact, we have been at the edge of it for quite some time after General Saha left, and I remember having also sat in these chairs. We have tried to do what we need to do. But yes, I think when you're looking at the defense industrial complex, it's much, much more complex than manufacturing. I think manufacturing, you have a wide consumer industry, you have standards which are at variance. Even when I look at your mobiles, you will see the difference. You can buy what you want, the consumer does what he needs to do, and everybody is cool about it. He aspires for the next but settles for the lower one. This we cannot do in defense industrial complex, I'm afraid. Because if I do that, then I am not talking the walk. I am walking the talk, sorry. And therefore, I think this complex thing, to my mind, we've got a platform. We need to build in the next 25 years. And to my thing, I think we need to decide which verticals we actually need to do well. We can't do, no country in the world can do everything by itself. So we need to collaborate. So friendly shores have to be there. Supply chain managements have to work. The military has to work. Academia, like somebody brought out, has to have the incentive to join the industry. Otherwise, what is happening is everything will be a work in progress. And for example, what about the engines on aircraft carriers or on fighter aircrafts? Engines are a key thing. So will we import? We have to be clear. Can we make it in 10 years? If the previous one we had to shelve after 2 decades, what are the lessons learned? Have they gone away? What are we looking at? So to my mind, If those worries are addressed upfront, it will do us a whole lot of good. With that, I'll rest and pass it back to Gen Subrata. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Rajeshwar. I've been very, very comprehensively covered. I would not try to take out any takeaways because I think you made it so succinct. In fact, I will go straight to Colonel Bharat Gupta. You know, Bharat, you just heard General Khandare give us the policy perspective, you heard the budget perspective, and you are seeing, in fact, your own arm in which you have served, you know, from outside. And I wanted to draw you into a kind of a case study to tell me, like, the Army requires communications, Air Force does, Navy does. You know, are we getting our act together and coming, let's say, to you now in the industry with a comprehensive set of requirement, or is it too piecemeal? Are we spending our budgets in the smartest manner? Because we just heard General Rajeshwar tell us, you know, how even the military has to play its part of the role. So any thoughts, any recommendations, any ideas on that?
Thank you, General Saha. Firstly, I wish to thank General Pannu and Dr. Chopra for giving me this opportunity to come and speak in this wonderful gathering. To come to this particular, you know, the session we are talking about is, you know, economy of war, right? That is the entire concept. And to me, the best economy would be winning a war without firing a bullet or without any expenditure. And today, if we look around, most of the nations are at a continuum of conflicts. There is a high uncertainty. There is a high volatility, which is all around. Now, the new age weapons of the information warfare, the cyber warfare, or even the social media, which is so nicely being used for addressing various challenges or launching various psyops across, do require a very strong digital infrastructure in place. And as it was just brought out, any war is ultimately a national approach, and therefore we need to have, it has been spoken that we need to have a comprehensive, firstly a philosophy out of which there has to be doctrines coming out, and that ultimately would dictate what exactly are the capabilities that need to be built up in times to come. I would just take an example of China here. 20 or 25 years back, China started its program of mechanization, wherein they started developing their own platforms. Today, they have graduated into the informatization, and they are moving into the cognitive domain, and ultimately the aim is to move into the social domain. If we look at the Atmanirbhar program and the 1100 items which have been listed, which have been included in the positive list, announced by the Ministry of Defense, they essentially are pointing to just one thing, that we are still in the mechanization stage. We are yet to move towards the informatization, followed by getting into the cognitive and ultimately the social domain. So that is one thing that we need to have a comprehensive picture firstly. And in this, there is a need for participation of not only the public, but also the private industry. The private industry, since defense requires very niche products, there is a cost associated with it, maybe in terms of research and development, and the order quantities are less. So what the industry wants is, at least the industry should know what is the minimum order quantity, assured minimum order quantity, so that they are able to do some investments into that. Also, I would like to touch upon a point of redundancies. Now, coming back to this point, we have redundancies at the services level. The Air Force, Navy, and the Army have their redundancies built. And then within the services, we have got the redundancies built into the arms and services again. So all these redundancies, if I look at it, they ultimately result in adding cost to the overall budget which is there. Can we look at a scenario, can we look at a situation wherein we are able to have a comprehensive view, remove these redundancies, so that the money is available for investment in the right tools and the right products which we require for future wars. Now, sir, coming back to the point of digitization. Now, this is something, digitization or the ICT infrastructure, if I call it, it is like a ether. It is like a ether which joins everything. It is, the services are not, would be able to speak. Today, we have a scenario wherein all the three services, the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force, have got separate ICT networks. And to top it all, these ICT networks don't talk to each other. I mean, from an Air Force network, if I want to connect to a Army network, that's not possible. And ultimately, in a warlike situation, we are not going to operate in silos. We would definitely need right infrastructure, right kind of networks, so that there is an interoperability and we are able to communicate with each other. So that is one point that I want to bring. Coming back to the point of budget, which was just spoken, the entire communication or digitization effort gets, financed through the major head of 4073, that falls under the capital outlay. Now, if I look at the capital outlay again, there is very little amount, close to about 300 crores. That is what I could, calculate. It's about 300 crore rupees left for doing any kind of sensible digitization project in the current financial year. And that too, that is out of the 5.25 lakh crores of the defense budget. That is what I'm talking about. If I look at the other, armies of the world, other defense forces, they spend close to about 5 to 6% of their capital outlay on the ICT networks and the digitization. Whereas in case of India, it is surprisingly 0.09%, which is nothing. There is a huge deficiency in ICT budget. There is a huge deficiency in the way we are planning our networks. It does require a comprehensive, overlook. We need to address this comprehensively. Now, here again, I would like to bring in a point. We have appointment of signal officer in chief. Now, he's the one who looks after the entire communication networks. Yeah, sure.
My next question.
Yeah, sure.
It is related to where you're going.
Sure.
I'm sorry for the interruption. Okay, so we just heard, the long and short of, I think, what Colonel Gupta is telling us is even the armed forces need to be much more comprehensive in their outlook, as indeed in formulating their requirement. With that, leaving that point over there, I get back now again to General Khandare, to specifically on two issues. One, Mr. Vipin Sondhi also brought out, this strategic partnership. And the second is this defense industrial corridors. With a lot of wisdom, the government had announced in 2018, two defense industrial corridors, one in the north, Uttar Pradesh, and the other in the south, they called it Tamil Nadu. It very much included Bangalore as well. So obviously these defense industrial corridors, the idea of that came from the heavy costs of producing things in the ordnance factories. One of the reasons being, some component is coming from down south in the Nilgiris, something is coming from Bombay, it is all being assembled in Madhya Pradesh in Itarsi, so it obviously adds hugely to the cost. So the idea was, okay, how can you reduce the transportation, both cost as well as time? How can you have common facilities of testing, certification and all? How can you make it more easy to do hand holding and all? So with all that in mind, they had come up with the defense industrial corridors. So, okay, have we left it completely to the two states, or is the Ministry of Defense still guiding the effort? Where are we seeing it going? And the second thing is on the strategic partnership. This again is a very forward-looking policy, but somehow or the other it is not seeing the light of the day. Your thoughts on both these?
Correct, sir. As regards the defense industrial corridors in the two states which were announced, now simplistically put, somebody will say only these two corridors are where action is going to be there. Not necessarily. There are many states which are pursuing their agendas of developing industrial corridors on their own. Uh, Now, one part, whether Ministry of Defense has left it to the two states, not necessarily. The ministry is doing a lot of hand-holding for these two corridors. So that part is over. Now, the next part, I can give you an example. Like Maharashtra, there's no defense corridor which has been announced. But the chief minister, I'm talking of the one who's the deputy chief minister now, at a point in time, he was the chief minister and he announced that announcement of a defense corridor by itself is not enough. What is extremely important is funding and the policies which will invite investments and talent there. So he immediately promised 300 crores for a particular bank with which they had an MOU. And you promise 300 crores, actually you get 3,000 crores investment from the market also. So that is the kind of action which is happening in India. And that is exactly in line with what the Prime Minister has said, that we want a 5 trillion economy and we want the defense exports to go to 5 billion. And here I want to connect a point which is related to the budgetary provisions which are made. Today, if you are having for the armed forces, say 3% or 1.9% of the GDP, whatever, imagine if from now, if your economy is going to double, won't that in real terms mean doubling the entire allotment? So that is something we all have to understand and we have to all work towards that. That is one issue. Strategic partnerships. Many of the strategic partnerships are never announced in the open. So there's a lot of discussion which takes place behind closed doors. And these strategic partnerships are not always very easy to formulate. There are at times when a lot of leverages are exercised by the people who agree to give you something. And that is where you realize that while it is very easy to say that during war also you must have strategic partners, it's not so simple. It is not permanent friends. Actually, during such conflict situations, we've seen how the cost escalations happen, how delivery times are extended, how leverages happen. So that is the reason where even when we are doing Atmanirbhar mission, there are certain components on which we still have to depend on strategic partners, which is happening. We may not be easy praise for these countries to be transactional by selling us everything that they want. There are things which we can make here, and that's exactly what the balance is being struck. What we can make here, even if it is one notch lower, we are ready to accept. We will grow to that level. But we cannot say that everything will be as was happening earlier, that everything will come from so and so country, and till we reach that level of sophistication or finish, we are not going to stop that. No. So strategic partnerships are happening. They will continue to happen. Most of it not declared, especially the components that we are talking of may not be declared at all. One more issue which, sir, you've not asked me, but I want to mention about the budgetary provisions. There is another example in the world that we can look at, and from our adversary. Whatever is meant for military, I am not saying defense, I am saying military, is not necessarily under the military budget. There are various heads under which this is done. There are various ministries where this budget is plonked. There are various expenditures of the military which are paid for by different ministries. You look at China, the forward infrastructure is paid for by the provinces. When I'm saying infrastructure, which includes the habitat, includes the roads, rails. When you look at education, military education, that has been undertaken by the Ministry of Education in those countries. Pensions are coming from the provinces. So there are various models. If we are too much in love with our own model, I don't think we are going forward.
Thank you. I think some very, very positive points that you put out. And just a point of clarification, this strategic partnership is certainly not meant for, or not primarily meant for the public sector. It is primarily meant for the private sector. I think that message, I think needed clarification. And very soon, like General Khandare clarified, and I wanted that clarification to come, I think we'll be seeing programs getting rolled out even out of this. So that I think should take care of the concern on strategic partnership that came in the previous one. You know, one of the points in Rajeshwar, you had said that the military has got its role to play, industry and so on. And we've heard in the previous session about R&D. You know, just to give you some statistics, between 2011 and 2021, 11 years, the total procurement that the three services made of DRDO developed products was to the tune of 1,30,000 crores over 11 years, which is roughly equal to 1 year's capital procurement it takes place, you know. So any thoughts that you have on how can we improve this entire ecosystem of defense R&D? I do understand DRDO is in the center of it, but how do you make the entire defense R&D, you know, setup look better? So you, 4 or 5, you know, your typical style takeaway points for the audience.
Right. Thank you, sir. Is it okay if I can just take a couple of points before I address your defense R&D? One is, like General Khandare also said about the strategic partnership model. My understanding, that I'm talking from the business, the defense industrial complex. I'm not looking at strategic relationships where we go with countries and, you know, you make a strategic equation and then pick up the stuff and pay for it. What I'm looking at is the model to introduce technology into our country which we don't have. And for that, you have to pick a variety of people outside and a variety who the OEMs and the ones inside. We were very hopeful that the subs would come in that way, or for that matter, let's say helicopters or any other thing. So I'm sure at some point in time it will get its due focus. So that is one. So I wanted to distinguish that at the outset because it has a bearing on what General Saha has asked me to speak about. The second thing is, one is when I told you about the resource allocation, I also told you about the new dimensions of technology which are coming in, which I didn't discuss at all because I went only in the first three. They will require a lot of money because that means you have to fund R&D research into going there. Somewhere I was reading, of course, the figures you just gave us, that's right. Somewhere I was reading that actually our leading research is done by academic institutions. You know, the industry and all are, going behind. And DRDO till very recently was constrained or, crimped into a particular, where they wouldn't allow the TOTs till they started sharing it, which is a process in work at the moment as I see. Okay. Now, how does India go ahead? Without technology, and that is my understanding, which maybe we'll understand in the next one. Without technology, you cannot make even current systems. If you had seen one of the reports of the SCORT, it was 68% vintage and 24% current and 8% state of the art. So when you're looking at this, we need to always cut down into 33, or whichever way, as good as is possible. For that, you need an engineering complex, which is like the corridors are a good, base to work that on. So you should back it up with engineering, which is in those corridors, whether you're making weapon systems, be it radars or guns or tanks or whatever else, or even cyber this thing, or like Bharat is there for communications. How do you secure that? Or space. You'll have to have small clusters. So, but you will have to have all those people who will do the heavy lifting, which means the people who will work and then learn with those industries very close by, so that they have a good industry interface and they go there. Now, we also know in India that we have a lot of education which is being imparted. But does it translate to jobs? Even when you look at some of the best guys in, let's say, Tata's or wherever, or Infosys or Wipro, they say we have to re-engineer our guys. After education, we have to reskill them as to what use this is. So which means, to me, defense is more complex. So the basic systems or the basic structures is what we need to have. One set of skilled people, And the superstructure, or I would like to say integrators, are the other set of people. If you have that, then we have a way forward. And for that, the military or the defense, all three services where there is an appreciation of what we need is very important. Otherwise, people will make what they want, they will be right. Everybody will be ready to say we have done it. But will it come good? I don't want to give you the US model because one has seen how they go about it. If you're looking at the 6 big fish who are, selling everything to the world, a lot of back end of technology, science, and hiving off is already dual use, right? One is feeding into the other and going back. So if you are saying the Chinese are doing it, they're doing nothing new. It's only that we have woken up to it. So I think we need to take it forward. So to my sense, I think we need more engineering skills along with this. And we need that zest to be participating in something that we will see a little later. DRDO by itself, I'm afraid, they must continue doing it because they have the core clusters which look at it, but they won't be enough. If you're looking at what he said, 5 billion exports or 35,000 crores and 1,75,000 crores turnover in 5 years, I think we have to really hit the ground running. So that's my sense, and I think it's a collaborative effort. It is whole of nation, as I said, in uneasy peace, then only we'll secure peace. I'm not going to war. Thank you.
Thank you, Gen Rajeshwar. It is quite exciting to note the number of engineering institutions that have started now offering defense technology even at the undergraduate level, which is, I think, a great sign. Something which was the exclusive preserve of the Defense Institute of Armament Technology has now been taken on by other universities, both in the public and private sector. And I think we are seeing the change coming. So if I can again come back to you, this time not so much your industry side, let's take your military side of the experience. We are hearing, a lot of initiatives in terms of theaterization. I don't want you to go there. That's a little complex. Okay, then we are talking about integrated logistics. There is likewise, from what you were stating, definite, potential of integrating the entire communication setup. You spoke about digitization as a part of your previous, question that you are answering. So do you see a possibility of being, a more integrated, more comprehensive amongst the three services, and how does it, affect the business of warfare, so to be?
Yeah. The simple and my short answer to the question is yes, because that's the only way forward. I just want to put one point here. Look at what we had a session wherein complete we did the dissection of what China is doing and what China is kind of capabilities it is building. I just want to put one point from the digitization and the ICT perspective of China. It's investing close to about $5 trillion in developing dual-use technologies in Xinjiang and Tibet. And what does that mean? It simply means that they would be able to launch their various operations very close to from the Indian borders. I think we must take a cue from that and build similar capabilities on our side. We have the huge border roads network which is coming up. There are roads which have been identified, close to about 75, right? Can we look at a scenario wherein we are able to have the telecommunication ducts with dark fibers built all along our border roads? That would give us a capability of easily deploying our 5G networks close to the border, which can be of a dual use, resulting in not only the economic growth of that area, but also in case of any conflicts, they can be very well used by our defense forces. So that is the first point. That is what China is doing. And my next point is looking at why stop at Army, Navy, and Air Force? Why can't we have a common platform or a common network which can be used by the defense as well as the central armed paramilitary forces? Because in the peacetime, you have the BSF, you have the ITBP manning our borders. They also require a similar infrastructure. You know, you would be surprised that BSF doesn't have its own dedicated ICT network till date. They are all working on lease lines. We can say in the armed forces, yes, we have the network for spectrum, but then the CAPMF doesn't have it. If you look at the model what US is having, if you look at the model what Israel is following, they have a network which is used both by the armed forces as well as their paramilitary forces. So that is the second point. Now, looking at the 5G story and how it is unfolding in our country, here we have the Air Force, which is almost having its AFCEL, which is working on a 5G network. It's a 5G capable network. Whereas when it comes to the Navy and the Army, I mean, those capabilities are yet to be built up. In case of Army, we have we have our cellular networks available only in 2 pockets, and that too, it is working on legacy 3G networks, which no one uses today. So it's high time that we build these capabilities for our defense forces, which are having a common platform, so that there is an interoperability which is ensured. Next, I would address the I was mentioning, we have an appointment of the signal officer in chief. Now, this term signal officer in chief was coined, I think, after due deliberation, because in case of Army headquarters, you have the DGs of the infantry, the army, the armored corps, or the army aviation, etc., etc. So ideally, he should be DG signals, but then he's called signal officer in chief. The reason why he's called signal officer in chief, I mean, someone must have thought that at some point of time, he would be the single point contact, he would be the single authority who would be ultimately responsible for planning, budgeting, and execution of ICT networks for all the 3 forces. So my, one point would be, if SONC's office can be empowered and brought directly under the office of CDS and the DMA, I think that would be something which would remove the redundancies. Today, there are so many networks in defense itself. You have the AFNet, you have the AFCEL, you have the Naval Communication System, you have the Defense Communication System, you have the ASCON, you have the ARAN. I mean, there are so many networks. If it's very difficult for commanders to, manage those, each and every handset if he's having it on his table. Forget about everything. So it's important that we have a converged network which is made available. And last point that I want to make is that there is a need for dedicated budget for ICT modernization, which at the moment is not there. There is a need for building a dedicated ICT budget under the Major Rate 4073. I think that would be a great game changer going forward.
Thank you. We have exactly 4 minutes, to complete our 45 minutes. I would request a minute each from all the panelists to quickly just wrap up. A minute each, please. We'll start with
What Bharat mentioned about the paramilitary forces, I just want to inform everyone that there is something which is coming up known as the National Joint Framework. And in that, there are 2 networks which are planned. One is the Defense Communication Network, DCN, and the second is the Civil Communication Network. Now, every paramilitary force or state police is not being given a different network to establish, and it is the Intelligence Bureau which will coordinate the CCN. So that part is already been thought of. The other issue which requires a lot of deliberation is, General Pannu is here, we've been struggling hard to ensure that whatever data is residing, it is static data, but for innovations, that data is required. Unfortunately, people in uniform and those who are innovators outside uniform, in fact, there are a lot of innovators in uniform also who need access to this data. But a large number of problems come up because confidentiality of data. There has to be a policy which is being worked upon where there has to be timeline sensitivity as regards the data classification is concerned. So that is the second important point which I wanted to make. And the last point I want to make is about the defense or the military hardware exports. The term which had been coined, business of warfare, I must compliment General Pannu for that, because for a large number of countries, warfare is business. But for us, it is not business, at least not stated so. So if we are going to export, we might fall into that category, but we shouldn't be saying that. So exports have to increase, and economically we have to get strong. If we get economically and militarily strong, we will achieve in our national security strategy of conflict avoidance.
Thanks.
Just 2 or 3 quick points. One, the you know, I think it's there's no gainsaying that the strength of a military will lie in the strength of its economy. I have no doubt about it. So are we going in a real GDP growth at 5, 6.5 or 8%, let's say for a decade? And thereafter, are we hitting the accelerator and going right up to 9.5? If that is what we are looking at, secure at India at 100, then my sense is that the defense increment or augmentation must be done in concert with that. Which means all the gaps, like what Bharat said, I think is one of the most important gaps in communication, because tomorrow all technology benefits, even in the defense, to the defense, even from the civil street, because everything is dual use or multi-purpose use, has to ride on communications. And therefore you have to fill in the gaps, give exclusive communication architecture. So your digital networks need to be there, right there where you mean you're going to employ your forces. Whether it's going to be behind, head, intermediate tier, it will require. And that's why the augmentation is required. And therefore, also, the second point is, our aspiration is to export. But often when we go abroad and we have faced this, the first question everybody is saying is, you all want to export, right? But are the Indian Armed Forces using the stuff? Right? So you have to bite the bullet there. That means, number one, it has to pass that filter, whatever we do, through the Indian Armed Forces. People will change, right? They won't remain the same. So, and procedures, policies, enablement can be done, but the quality cannot be compromised by anyone. So that is the acid test, and if you are looking at it, figures don't have a meaning, even if you don't reach a target or reach 3 times it. What is important is the moment you have something good, people will ask for it. If you look at it, all our exports are all in proven systems or something which has deterrence and could be very close to, so you are going to actually be working towards that. With all, that's all that I have to say. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Just 2 or 3 important points. First is, we begin with org restructuring, that is most important. Strengthening the office of the Signal Officer in Chief. Second is building ICT networks which are dual use and have the interoperability between the 3 services and the paramilitary forces, which General Khandare has confirmed. Third most important point, which I feel, is there is a need for having a dedicated budget for ICT modernization, because until and unless we have a budget, we won't have the frameworks, we won't have the accountability. And until we have a framework and accountability in place, it's very difficult to reach at the goal that we all are thinking of.
Thank you. So all that remains is on behalf of my panel to once again thank the organizers, and what a wonderful panel. Very wide range coverage. And finally, let me end with my favorite note. At this rate, we will win India's wars with Indian solutions. Thank you and Jai Hind.
Thank you so much, sir. sirs, and my immense gratitude